Hi, I'm Simon Bradbury from Firefly Studios, and I'm here to talk about all things Roman, in particular Caesar 3 and what kind of crazy things we did back in the day.
Central Italy, 750 years before the birth of Christ.
Welcome to an interview with Simon Bradbury, lead programmer of the classic Caesar 3 and now head of Firefly Studios. Today you get to see a chat we had where we talked about Caesar 3's secrets and history, how it came to be, and thoughts on the new Augustus modded version of the game. I know you want to get right into it, so we begin after I just explained how Caesar 3 helped shape my interest in history and even influenced the fact that my honeymoon was in Italy.
We had a thing in Time magazine which was talking about games you should let your children play, and Caesar was one of them. And I think there weren't that many that they really liked, because at the time they were still banging on about, whether games made you go out and shoot people instantly as soon as you started playing them.
Yeah.
Which I think they finally decided they don't. But that was the big thing then. But so the games you really should let your children play was things, stuff like Caesar, which is great for us. I mean, it's really nice to be in Time magazine. But no, we love all things historical. We've spent our life making historical games, pretty much, and we've been doing it for a long time. As well.
Yeah, you have. Like, I actually didn't realize you went on to found Firefly until much more recently, because I did play Lords of the Realm too back in the day, and then I didn't personally play a lot of Stronghold, but I had a friend who played Stronghold, and I was like, oh, this looks really cool, but you can't get every game when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, like only in like the last few years I was like, oh, it's like the same people, and that's actually kind of rare in game dev, because now I'm more into the industry. I'm like looking who's doing what, where are the people going, where they come from, and it's not a lot of cases where like a group of game devs have actually continued through the decades in some form to continue to create games over the years. Yeah,
no, you're right. I mean, to have it's like that sign you used to see over the door, established in whatever. I mean, Firefly was established in 1999, and the fact we're still going, which is unusual. Most devs kind of, they make it and they go on to do something else, or they make some stuff and go bust, or they don't make it and can do something else.
Yeah.
But to do the same thing as well. I mean, maybe there's something wrong with us. We're still making castle games. Maybe we haven't grown up properly or something.
Well, there's always room for more castle games.
Indeed.
So, one thing that, because the people who are working on the modded version of Caesar 3, Julius and Augustus, they're on my Discord server, and their main question is, when you heard about Julius and Augustus, what did you think? Like, what was your feeling at the time?
No, I mean, I think we were. I mean, again, this have to be. I guess I don't have any sort of legal implications for what I say here, because I don't. It's nothing to do with us anymore, really. It's sold on to Sierra, who's sold to Activision, and all that sort of thing. So, no, I mean, it's very flattering. I mean, that's the thing. I'm always flattered when people do mods of all the games, but to kind of go all the way back to them and to be modding it, I think is super flattering. And I for one will be definitely looking to play it, because it's I haven't actually got a version I can play at the moment in front of me, because you have to kind of go through various download sites and things like that to kind of do it. And it's hard for me to go to a lot of those sites on my computer, because all these alerts come up due to internal security and things like that, going, no, you're not allowed to do that. So there's quite a few games from that period, Caesar being one of them, that I would love to go back and play again. I've kind of, just partly because I remember most of it, but I don't remember all of it, and going to some of the questions you've got for me, I'm going, okay, I think I know the answer to that, because it's 25 years or whatever it is since we made it. But yeah, no, I'm flattered and looking forward to playing it, I think.
Yeah, it's hosted on like GitHub and stuff like that. And even for me, it's like it's a confusing website. It's where all the hardcore programmers nowadays go, and it's very confusing.
GitHub is set up, isn't it, to make you almost to put people off, I think. Unless you are like unless you have a certain level of knowledge, you look at it and go, "Oh my god," and run away.
Yeah, like a lot of people would just open the page and be like, "Nope, I'm leaving."
I think once you kind of know the magic things to do, it's not too bad. But I think really what I'd be looking for is a click me here, or in the ideal world it would be a go to this and run it in the browser. It would be the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
But how are they doing?
Doing well. They're about to release a new version, I think, in the next week. So they're basically running it like, proper game dev, as far as I understand it. And they're introducing a new plague mechanic on how disease and sickness spreads through the city.
Rather than just going boom, it's all there.
Yeah. So they're like setting it up. I think it works. I'm not sure if you've ever played Oxygen Not Included, but it's like a base building thing where, like, if someone touches something, then it passes the disease to that thing, then someone else touches that thing and it passes. I think it's going to work like that.
That sounds very Caesar-y to me. So it sounds like the sort of thing we would have done if we had the time.
Yeah, like that's my favorite kind of modding. It's like, if the developers had another 10 years and an infinite budget, what would they do? And that's the kind of mods I like, because there's a few projects out there which are, they're deemed, even if they're quite, they're either vanilla friendly, where it's like, okay, this is pretty much like the original game, but a bit better, or they're sort of imagining what the developers would want, because especially, I know back in the 90s, game dev was very fast. Like, like a lot of them were like 1-year projects, and or even less, I think, in many cases. And it's just insane that it's even possible to make a game like Caesar 3 or like Pharaoh and the follow-up games in like a year. Because I remember Pharaoh, which I think you've already moved on to Firefly by Pharaoh times.
I have, yeah.
And Pharaoh was like a year after Caesar 3. I was like, how did they make this in a year? And I know it would have been super stressful, and I assume Sierra was spending a lot of money on it, and they wanted to get the game out. But it's still kind of crazy that games back then were made in such short times.
It is, but I kind of like handcraft. It's like the equivalent of a lot of it's obviously longer than a game jam, but it's like the equivalent of like an indie dev today, right? You kind of you make quick decisions. You kind of go for the punchy gameplay, and get most of the ideas down quick. And so it's like a kind of extended game jam in a way, really. And a lot of good stuff, to my way of looking at it, comes out of game jams, like cool ideas, interesting concepts. And I think that was the other thing. I think, we loved history, but what I liked, and Eric, who I founded Firefly, liked, who was the producer. Essentially, he was in America, I was in London, and we used to communicate over phone calls occasionally, or the brand new thing called the internet, where you'd kind of like communicate over. But we both loved game, and what we liked about games was kind of like new ideas. Like, oh, that's a cool idea. So the idea of them. Those guys doing something where they kind of go, the plague spreads on touching. It's really simple. It's very easy to comprehend, but it just works. They're really nice ideas, and it's done simply. You kind of want the user to understand, what's going on, really. I think, rather than hiding things from the player. So it's like a black box, and you've got no idea what's going on. I like things that are very straightforward. He touches him, he gets it. Okay, I can see it. I understand the concept visually. And I think with a lot of the games we did, I think that's what we always tried to do. But I'm kind of moving into your later questions now.
Oh no, but I mean that is a pretty heated topic. So like with any game that has a long following and a cult following, there's a lot of heated topics which we will get into, and that sort of touches on it. But before we do that, I should ask, when you were making Caesar 3 back in the day, were you considering that people might be playing this 20, 25 years later?
Nope.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
You thought it would just die out and okay, that's it.
Well, it's not that we thought. I guess we never really even considered that. Really, it's because games in those days, as you said earlier, they were quick to make, and Caesar 3 was actually quite a long game. The way we looked at it then.
Right.
I mean, when I first started making games, I would make a game in 3 months for somebody, and I would do the not just the programming and the design, but I'd do also the art and some of the sounds. You know, unfortunately for the poor viewer. But you could do that, and you could then make a game, and you could then, someone would either commission it or you could sell it to somebody, and they would put it onto a disc. I mean, it's slightly after cassettes, but they put it on a disc and sell it, and then you go on to make the next one, and then slowly they took a bit longer. You had a bit longer to make it as the art budget, as the memory the computers had got bigger. Then the art could be bigger. So the art took a bit more time and that kind of thing. So by the time we got around to Caesar, and Caesar was made, I think, in a little over a year. And I think Pharaoh basically, I think one of the advantages Pharaoh had was that they used the kind of engine side pretty much as was, and then they basically redid all the graphics. They played around a lot with a lot of the design ideas, and so there was some changing of code to accommodate different game design bits, but a lot of the way the graphics were displayed, the things moved, the UI worked and all that sort of thing, they could reuse a lot of code, which helped, I think. But for Caesar, yeah, it had just over a year, and so you kind of made a game quite quickly, and prior to that, games kind of came and they went, and they, every year there were loads of games. A magazine would be talking about the next new thing. People weren't really talking about many games from previous years. It hadn't got to that point where everyone was going, oh, you remember that game, because gaming was so new.
Right, yeah.
That it hadn't got that history, it hadn't got that sense of time scale yet.
It hadn't been long enough to be nostalgic.
No, exactly. I mean, even at the time of Caesar, I remember like my parents they still weren't entirely sure that I'd got a proper job. It was like, look, the games are doing well. I'm earning some money, but it's like, yeah, but it's games. It's like your dad was saying to you, like computers are the future. That's the computers, yes. Like I did electrical engineering, electronics at university, and that was great. But then I kind of went and did loads of stupid stuff, like by making games, which wasn't a proper job. And even then, I think still in the kind of the mid-90s, it was a bit dubious. I mean, now obviously it's a proper career and it's a huge industry, and nobody would say anything otherwise. But very different then. So at the time, there was no concept of of a game being big in the future. So we thought people would play it for a few years, and then it wouldn't go because it was bad. There would be something new and different coming along, and that has been interesting to see over the years how certain franchises have kind of stayed, and people look back upon them with fondly, and why is that? There's certain games that I look back on a few early dungeon type games, like I love Dungeon Keeper, for example. I'm a big fan of that. A big fan of Populous, the God game, and I know there's been homages to those sorts of games, but nothing's ever quite kind of really brought back that kind of initial kind of joy of the original games, I don't think.
Yeah, I feel that as well. There's a lot of people who are inspired by those old games, and many do try and replicate it, but it's never quite. There's always something, like, it's hard to even define what is missing. It's just something is missing. It's not quite there.
Yeah, it's a kind of excitement of like, we can do whatever we want. We're going to do something really stupid here, and we did. And I think people pick up on that in a way.
Yeah, I think that is something, because I remember a lot of old games. There are just dumb things, like in Dungeon Keeper. There's a first-person mode, and it's like, why? It doesn't help in any way. It's terrible to play, but you can go down and like look at the demons eye to eye, and then you're there for like 30 seconds and you're back out again. it's not useful, but you could do it. And maybe it's that sort of thing that
I think
I always
so,
tend
yeah.
to talk about like unnecessary detail. Like it doesn't have to be there, but it is.
And the trouble is, I think today, I think it's hard if you've a big studio and you've got people in place whose job it is to, you know, keep quality up and give it a, you know, a kind of, you know, not uniform aesthetic and things like that. Try doing that then, because they'll look at you as if you're mad. You know, I know when you get to a bigger studio and it's a bigger enterprise, it's just harder to do that sort of thing. I mean, indie devs can do it, and you know, some of the funnest games these days are indie games. As we know, you know, we're recently bought by Devolver Digital, and they've got plenty of, you know, very left field games under their kind of belt, and some, you know, some work, some don't. But I quite like some of the things they're able to still try. You know, I'm a bit envious sometimes of the stuff that those guys can pull off.
Yeah, I think of all the publishers out there, I think Devolver is the craziest. So you'll probably be able to do something with them.
It's a good home for us. We knew that.
All right. So next question. Yes, about the origins of Caesar. So Caesar 1. So a little before my time in terms of playing games, but I did more recently over the last few years go back and play Caesar 2 and Caesar 1. And the more I went back in Caesar's history, it started to feel more like SimCity than anything else. And Caesar 1 kind of almost feels like a Roman SimCity. Like, it's an assumption that you played SimCity before making Caesar, but how did that influence you at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think it influenced a lot of people in the gaming industry when Will Wright brought SimCity out. It was a breath of fresh air. It was like, whoa, that's really interesting. And it was kind of like a game, but not a game. It's almost like town planning. I mean, looking at it now, you think, no, that's that's like a pixel art game. But at the time, it was just so different that everyone, I think, played it or at least had a look at it, because it was just so unusual. And for us, that's our kind of game. You know, we're big into sort of strategy games, but real-time type of strategy games where stuff happens at a reasonable pace. And so for us, it was great. And then immediately it was like, well, okay, you know, maybe we could do something similar. But we like his historic, we like his history. So, we'll do Roman cities, and off we go. And so, you know, we, like everybody does, you know, we borrowed some ideas from SimCity. We wanted to do some things, you know, our own way, and you know, but we took the idea of a city planner as a game, because prior to that, like now these days, it astounds me that you can get a simulation that will do everything from, you know, a waste management plant to probably a donkey breeding farm or something like that. You know, you could do anything you want on it. Whereas then, you know, the idea of a simulation was unusual, and probably the first and greatest sim was, you know, the simulation of a city is natural. And so it was a new genre then, and we basically kind of, I don't know if we were the second, you know, city builders genre but we were certainly close. We were in the next wave of. Yeah,
Caesar 1
sure.
was still in the 80s, right?
Might have been, yeah.
It was like very early 90s.
Yeah, I think so.
Like that would actually be interesting. Is Caesar the second city builder?
Who knows?
I'm gonna have to check that out. That would be an interesting fact.
If not, it was it was certainly in the following wave of them, and I don't think there were that many, because, you know, not that many people. There weren't as many game studios. It was harder to just get set up from the get-go, and to get published. I mean, that was the big deal, right? It's not like today where anybody could do anything on the browser or on Steam or whatever. You just make it, and then you had to go and find a publisher willing to not just pay you some money, but actually, you know, make a load of discs and ship them to shops.
Yeah, like it had the physical aspect. You couldn't just get it to people.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and magazines had to review it, so you did need a publisher in those days. So probably, yeah, that's. I hadn't really thought about that, but maybe that is true. But that's why I think, you know, we were definitely wanting to kind of, you know, we were excited by this new concept of a simulation, And then we wanted to make it our own, and so we set off and thought, great, there's some nice ideas in there, and then we'll borrow some of them, but then we'll just do some other stuff as well. And I think that's how Caesar 1 started. And then from then, I think, to my way of thinking, that the Caesar series then sort of went its own way a little bit and kind of followed a different path and followed a little bit on the flavors of the day, because I think what we did kind of mirrored what the industry was doing a little bit at the time. But also, as we went on, we didn't want to make the same game, because we had fun making games, so we wanted to make something cool. You don't want to sit down with a blank piece of paper and make another cool game. So it had to change, if nothing else, really, just so that we could have fun making it, really.
And yeah, just extending from that, when you came up, did you come up with the walker mechanic of the people walking around?
I did.
Cities? You did. That was you.
I did.
Did you realize that you were making something that not only was new, it's kind of unique to you in all of gaming?
No, I mean, I think because I was challenged by the way we did the design. Was David was kind of like the boss of Impressions, and he was like, right, we're going to do this game about city building in Rome, and it's going to have these things in it. And he would set out the overall kind of, what we're going to do. And then because I was the coder, I would then, but the benefit, I think, was that I was not just a coder, but I was a designer as well. So I went, okay, right, this is what we're going to do. And then I would just go off and do it. And we wouldn't have to have lots and lots of meetings. I would just go, here, have a look at this. And he would go, cool, or occasionally go, can we change that? But so it gave me a lot of leeway to do that. And I think with the walker mechanic, it wasn't so much I set off to make the walker mechanic as a thing. It was more, we wanted to do something different. And we liked the SimCity sort of sense of everything's a radius. And you place a building down and it affects things around it, but we always found that was a bit static. And so the walker mechanic came out of an idea, out of a desire. Well, two things. One, it was, to be honest, it was also quite an efficient way of coding the game, because bandwidth was performance was limited then. So having a walker move around a fixed road is miles easier than any form of pathing algorithm, because it's just straightforward. Turn right, left at a junction. But we also wanted to basically add a sense of randomness into the city, which is kind of where the walker mechanic came from. And I know that there may be a slight issue with it, but it certainly introduces that sense of randomness, because where you place things and somebody goes left to go right affects the overall sense of the city. So rather than it just being a kind of pretty static simulation, the people turning left or right or moving down the roads gave you a kind of randomness. You could control that randomness to some degree by having the way by having more road choices going in certain directions, but so where the people was where the action was. And we liked that idea of you're looking at the thing, you're seeing a busy street, that's where the houses are going to grow more. That was the idea from it. It was to try to combine that a bit of randomness and the life of where the people were kind of feeding into your visuals of that's where the action should be. And I think that was a relatively simple decision. But no, it wasn't like, oh, we're definitely making a genre here. It's just like, oh, what a good idea. We'll do that. And we kind of knew it was a kind of cool idea at the time, because no one had done it. But it didn't feel like a big idea. It just felt like a natural progression of SimCity in a way, or the way that or city builders.
Right. Because now if anyone uses a walker mechanic, it's an Impression style city builder.
Yep. And
since you came up with it, I guess it's a Simon style city builder.
Well, I mean, I'm not claiming that. I'm gonna. but yeah.
But yeah, as you mentioned, there were some things didn't always work perfectly. And I do have to ask you just a couple questions on bugs, because this has divided the community for decades now. Because there's the way I play it is the way you describe it. It's very visual. You look at the city, you can see the resources, you can see the people, and you just sort of adjust based on what you see. But any game with a cult following, they've dissected the code, they've crunch the numbers. They're like, this is 2.73 of what, and they're very, very specific. The main bug that is very contentious, which I think it's a bug, but a lot of people say it isn't, and it's just a difficulty thing. It's the immigration glitch on very hard. I do know very hard was a difficulty that was added a bit after release. It came in a patch, and I'm not sure if you were involved with that. But there's this bug, which I'm not sure if you know it, where between 200 and 300 population, on very hard difficulty, the city is guaranteed to be unhappy and people would move out. So what would happen on very hard is you would gain population up until 200, and once you cross 200, people are unhappy and they move out, and it drops below, then they're happy again, then they move back in, then they move back out, and you're stuck at like 250 population.
Yeah. Now, I am probably... Eric would be a better place to do that, to tell you the definitive answer on this, because he was the producer, he was the one that would have been putting the patches out, listening to, he sat between me and QA, and so he was going, here's the list of bugs, I'd fix them, we'd talk about them, so he would know for sure. But to me, I can't believe that was on purpose. I think that is just a bug that has persisted over the years. Why would we do that? There is no reason for us to do that. It wouldn't, because that would be cruel, right? It's like
well, that's what I thought.
200 population. Why would we do that? No, I'm pretty sure that is just a bug that, and because it's on very hard, and because it's at certain, it's towards the kind of like the hard end of very hard. You have to play to a certain point to even see that. My guess is it's got through QA,
right?
And nobody has really reported that. And unlike there's lots of advantages today, but that would be fixed straight away because it would be in a patch. And typically these days we're still patching games a year after release, and it would go into some list, and then it would come into someone's plate, and it would be viewed, and then it would all get solved. But those days it would come out, and then we wouldn't know about that. There's no way to kind of hear about those issues at the time because there was no internet to really kind of feed back on as such. People occasionally wrote in on the pieces of paper that were in the boxes as feedback, but then someone had to go and read all those, and that was like probably like a month later, 2 months later, if at all. And so I reckon that unless our QA at the time in Boston had spotted that, that's just got through the cracks. I would heartily recommend that Julius and Augustus fix that.
Right. So the second bug, which I think is a bug, but it's being canonized basically because the Pharaoh remake is on the way and they're implementing it as a feature. Because, but they're not bugs, they're just features. It's the forced walker mechanic. So do you know how those turned out?
Remind me again on the forced walker.
Okay, so forced walker, basically what happens is when you place a building like a library, if there's a road that's touching the south end of the building and the north end of the building, basically the walker would always spawn on the southern side, and when they wanted to return to the building, they would always try to return to the northern side. So what would happen is if you build a road that's like this, one road's touching the south end, one road's touching the north end, and then you just create an infinitely long loop round the other way, the walker would spawn from the southern end, walk a bit, and then when they wanted to return, they would walk the entire map to get to the northern end of the building.
Yep. That is not obviously by design as we haven't designed in an exploit to
Right.
do that. We just haven't. It's an edge case that basically is obviously used as an exploit. Because I think the way we looked at things is we would look at a building, and then we would look at all the squares around it and find a place for them to come out. And I think for the sake of variety, we probably went with the north, the exit, and the south, because I think it just gives it a bit of variety if they come out from one bit. Typically they would start here and look for a point, start there and look for an exit point. And as a result, then we've ended up with that exploit, really. But That wasn't on purpose.
Okay.
It's because a lot of the things that were done at the time were done for speed, because Caesar does quite a bit with performance. That's quite a lot of little sprites on it, all moving around the map and doing all that sort of thing. But to get that performance, you kind of need to sort of do some things relatively simply. So having a simple exit point, a simple entry point, was the way. Otherwise, if you're doing a lot of continual checking and lots of big kind of checks for long paths around the map, you can slowly kill performance, I think.
Right.
That's my excuse anyway.
It was mainly there to provide like visual variety.
In terms of the way that people, yes, exactly. The idea of people coming out in different places around the. Otherwise, it would look a bit samey, right? If they always appeared in the same spot, because there was never any door. It was always, somewhere around the perimeter, which the actual door could be wherever the artists rotated or decided to put the building, and even then it wouldn't really line up. So we decided that because it was an abstract idea anyway, we would just abstractly put them out in one point and abstractly put them out in the other.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have analyzed the game in detail, I think like my feeling is at some point they've overanalyzed it a bit. and put some things down to grand design when maybe it was just sort of a spur of the moment thing.
I think so, and I think I hate to kind of ruin people's idea of that was grand design when it wasn't. It was probably simple expediency of this is a good way to make it run quickly and also to kind of give visual feedback, but gives visual interest. But as a result, we've allowed an exploit.
Right.
But to be honest, in some ways, I'm quite glad about that. I think in all our games, I think I spend my life kind of arguing with QA, whether it's the latest Stronghold game or whether an online game or even then in Caesar, is if people find exploits, the QA always want to remove them, and for most of them they're right. If it's a bug or really ugly, but quite often a game with a few exploits in it is I think is a good thing, because you as the player kind of want to exploit this. You want to min-max it, you want to get the most out of it, you want to kind of if you're a good player, an expert player, you want to know the tricks. You want to know how can I get around this, and if I do this, perhaps that wasn't what they intended, but I'm going to do it, and that gives me the edge to beat a really hard level or something. I think that keeping some of those exploit type things in is good.
Yeah, I mean, for the Forced Walker, whether it's intended or not, it's a whole new play style. I actually replayed the entire Caesar 3 campaign using Forced Walkers on every map, and it's a completely different experience. It adds replayability.
Exactly, and I think the slight, and this is on one of your questions as well. I think the slight kind of not sad thing, but the thing we would have got to do if we'd had more time would have been to spend more time on the walker mechanic, to not have to have you do the exploit, the Forced Walker, but to give you some more controls over it. And I think that's where, with the benefit of history, looking at it, that's what I think we would have probably spent more time on if we'd have had to have had the luxury of another whole month or something like that, maybe. I don't know.
A whole month? Oof.
I know,
pushing
right?
it there. A month of game design.
Well, maybe 3 weeks. But and then putting in some UI to allow you to do that. It would have required some elegant thinking on it to allow you to because you don't really want to make it so if you put something in that people have to use, then they feel they have to use it, right? And then you can easily end up with a map with loads of little kind of UI kind of widgets all over the place directing traffic, which would have kind of ruined the immersion a little bit and made it quite
developers
hard to do.
Since inspired by your games have struggled with improving the walker mechanic. They've tried, maybe you set fixed paths, maybe they're just smart and they know where to go, and it's always been sort of not quite as interesting as just it's random and it's gonna mess up sometimes.
Yep. No, I agree, and I think you'd probably need to go down something whereby you put in you have a set number of flags or something like that, so you could place, A, B, C, D, E or something like that, and these are the main suburbs areas of your town, meeting place, whatever you want to call them, and people will tend to gravitate more towards those. I think something simple like that could work and be very visual and be quite rewarding and allow you to kind of figure out how to exploit that quite easily. But I think it needs to be more that than a traffic light system, I think, which would be wrong. Okay. Again, that would need some thinking.
Quick question on the music. I'm not sure how involved you were with the music of Caesar 3. But people have realized in maybe the last 5 years that it's very much like Ben-Hur's music, as in the old film. And we're wondering did you know about that?
I mean, Rob, who did the music, has been with us forever since then. So he's done a lot of the music on Stronghold, which is very popular. And you were saying about getting married. I think quite a few people have got married to the Stronghold soundtrack, to my knowledge, because a few people wrote in to ask us if they could, and we're like, well, of course you can. Crazy, because you can. But Rob's a great guy. I mean, there's no way I was involved. Rob is such a perfectionist that he asks lots of questions. He gets us to do lots of things, but if we ever asked him could we get involved in the music, he'd just look at you with a kind of odd stare and go away. No, I mean, Rob I know he likes his orchestral scores. He likes the film industry. He likes to, he's always been one for bringing the concepts of film scores into computer games. So that is all I can tell you on it. Whether or not he's plagiarized Ben-Hur or not.
No, it's not quite to that extent. It's just some of the melodies are like, oh, that sounds familiar. Because I remember I watched Ben-Hur when I was a kid, but I never clocked that the music in Caesar 3 was similar. And it definitely worked. Like, whatever they did with the soundtrack in Caesar 3, it works because people love it. Because people play the game for hours and hours and hours, and the soundtrack never gets old. It never gets grating. It never, one thing that people have never modded is the music.
Yep.
They're not changing that at all. So it worked. Whatever the process. Rob is quality.
I mean, what he does is always right up there quality wise, whether he's doing sound effects or music scores. And we've had some amazing music from him on the Stronghold games and other things we've done since. He takes a long time to do it, and he never lets us hear it until literally about a month before the release. And it's it drives us nuts, but he's brilliant. And yeah, he would have done a good job. He probably would have listened to he probably would have gone off and watched some old Roman just to soak it up, some of the, Ben-Hur, a few Spartacus, who knows what else he's listened to, just to sort of get his head in the right space. And then he'd have gone off and composed something, but definitely nothing to do with me.
Right. Okay, so I know we got to wrap up now. So just one final sort of overview question of what you, continuing from some of the earlier points, what you would have wanted to do with Caesar 3 if you had, let's say, another 2 years to work on it. I know that's really crazy. You had another 2 years to work on it. Because one thing people always ask about, the one thing people miss from Caesar 2 is the world map, where you could build on the map and build roads between cities and all of that and invade the other sort of cities. Or just, you mentioned improvements on the walker system and things like that. Just what would you wanted to do? What was in the plans for Caesar 3 if you had more time?
I think, it wasn't in the plans because, we were beholden to Sierra at the time and things. But I think if we'd had more time, I think certainly, as the walker system aside, which we probably should have spent some more time on, I think, in retrospect. Because I think Caesar 3 moved away a little bit from the Empire map concept, and it kind of went to what was fashionable, I think, at the time, which was more of a campaign structure. At the time, quite a few, the big RTS games were sort of coming out, like Warcraft and Age of Empires and Command & Conquer, and they would have campaign structures. And so I think that's, that we went with the fashion of the day and kind of moved to a more campaign-driven story there. And I think what I would like to have done, because we kind of went there with the previous games, and we're going there now with. I mean, I'm not. You know, Nick would probably want me to plug Romans in this video, so I'm going to plug it. But and Romans is a different game to a certain extent. It's a city builder. It's got some different mechanics, some different ideas in it, but it's not a straight kind of like for like. It's not a walker system mechanic game like Caesar is. It's got its own interesting ideas. But what we wanted to do was something perhaps a little bit more like that, which was how your city interacts on the bigger empire level. I mean, I'm always fascinated as a kid when you'd open history maps and you'd see the Roman Empire, and you'd see like over here there's these little pictures of something. You go, oh, that's wheat, and that's spices over here, and that came from, and silks came from over here in kind of Babylon or something like that, and amber would come from up here on somewhere in the Crimea, and what did we get from England? Probably a bit of wool or something like that, and Spain, and you could see how all the sort of empire pulled together all of these exotic goods, or not even exotic goods, but stuff they needed, and how the empire worked as a simulation on the empire level, and that I think was something that I always felt that we'd never really done justice to. I kind of wanted to do this kind of bigger picture, zoom out simulation of how that would work, but we were always focused, because we had to be focused on the city and on building houses, and it's a city builder and a city sim. But I kind of wanted to do this overarching empire kind of building kind of game, which is kind of where we've gone with Romans. But to try and do everything in one go, I think it literally would have taken us another year probably to do that well, I think.
Right, yeah. It's always, whenever people ask for features, it's like, why don't you just do everything? Bit hard.
No, I know, because if you do everything, then you end up, you kind of please some people, but then you don't do everything well is the problem.
Yeah.
It's better to do fewer things, but do them well, or do them better, and make something really good and strong. And then maybe, if we had have done Caesar 4, shortly after that, perhaps that's where we would have gone to. But we didn't, because I think, then things changed at Impressions, and David Lester left Impressions, and so we left Impressions, and Impressions kind of went on to then make Pharaoh and some great games after that. But yeah, I think that's what the Empire map was good. We never quite got combat right either. I think that was perhaps we were getting slightly better at it over 3 years, but it was still a little bit. It was never proper RTS standard combat.
Well, I can tell you what people think of the entire series, from Caesar 1 all the way up to Emperor, the final game of the series. People always say either Caesar 2 or Caesar 3 has the best combat.
Oh.
So you're doing pretty well. It kind of slowly fell apart Pharaoh onwards.
I think we were a bit more passionate about combat perhaps than those guys. I mean, those guys were some amazing design and art that went into those games, and I think they were a bit more focused on the history and the kind of the look of the thing, and they look and that shows. We were perhaps a little bit more into our toy soldiers.
Yeah,
but we never,
because late 90s, the big focus on RTS games, all the big hitters coming out, so it was sort of more in the lens.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think that was why I think at the end of the day we went on after Impressions had kind of broken up, and we just thought, what are we going to do now? So Eric and I thought, we'll set our own company up to do essentially what was kind of like a kind of medieval city builder, but with an RTS combat, which was Stronghold. And so we kind of that's how Stronghold was born. Actually, it was to us it was a direct descendant of Caesar 3, in that it used some similar ideas from Caesar 3, but really kind of beefed up the combat.
Thank you so much for doing this interview, because it is rare that we can actually talk to like the creators of some of the most legendary games ever.
Well, I'm still alive, I guess, so that's good.
So I mean, You know, even of the ones still alive. I mean, they don't usually talk to people. Like we're just left wondering all these questions. What was on purpose? What was an accident? What was the intention in the first place? So thank you so much. For
Hopefully,
doing this interview.
hopefully I haven't ruined anyone's day by saying it. Well, you know,
No,
with my
like,
answers.
if anyone, those people have ruined my day, and you've made my day better. You know, some things, they're just bugs, okay?
I think so. I think that's probably your best port of call to start with, right? That's probably the most likely answer. And then, certainly in those days, because as you said, things were made so quickly. That you made a snap decision, and a lot of good games were made that way. But if there's something wrong, it's probably just because it wasn't wrong.
All right, we can wrap up here. Thank you so much. If you want to plug anything, you can. You've already plugged Romans.
Well, I mean, I think that's why I think, you know, we're talking Roman stuff, is we're back to doing Roman city building, and Romans is obviously our kind of online game, which the big advance there is 16 players can play on the same map, and you interact with other people. You can collect their resources when they're offline, and they can collect yours, and you can build together, and it's much more about the wider empire, and it's kind of unlike Stronghold Kingdoms, which is a kind of successful kind of PvP, which is very red in tooth and claw PvP game. Romans is a little bit more PvE, and so you're fighting the barbarians a lot more. But we're having fun with that. We've only been building that one for about 10 years, you know, so that's shows you the difference.
Just a small project, you know, on the
A
side.
small project. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Zach, thank you very much. It's been fun.
It's been fun. Thank you. You should head out.
I should. Zach, it's been great speaking to you.
It's been wonderful.
Do it again sometime.
Yes. All right, see you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.